Hi everybody and welcome to another video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. I cannot believe we haven't done this video yet. In fact, I think it's one that sort of slipped by and we just realized that we'd never actually done the comparison, but my goodness, do we ever need to. We are comparing Casio's PX-S1000 to Casio's PX-S3000. Not very different in price, but oh so different in experience. We're going to be pointing out exactly where they are similar and where they are quite different, letting you hear both of them through a great set of microphones so you can get a sense of their own speakers, talking about the action, talking about the sound, talking about the auto accompaniment, all of that stuff. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you sincerely enjoy what you see. If you have not had a chance to subscribe yet, if this is the very first time you're stopping by to see our channel, we would love you to join the community. So either now or at the end of the video, hit that subscribe button so that you will be notified every time we come out with new videos, which we do all the time. So without further ado, let's get started with the PX-S1000 and 3000 comparison right away. So for all that's different between these two, the 1000 and the 3000, there are some things that are exactly the same between these two instruments. And I guess that's the reason why they are so close in weight. Casio likes to talk about the fact that these are the slimmest around. And in fact, they are very close to the slimmest. Depending on how you measure this, you could definitely argue that they are the slimmest, both in terms of just the physical footprint of the instrument and the weight. These clock in at like 27 pounds. You can walk for blocks with 27 pounds on your shoulder if you had to. And both of these instruments may just be instruments that you wind up using in a professional setting. Certainly the PX-S3000 gives a strong argument for why this might actually be used in a professional setting. I could totally see that happening. So here are the things that are in common. The speakers are exactly the same between these two instruments. We've got a pair of 8-watt speakers for a digital piano of this size and of this weight. That is a serious punch. Now, Kawai, with its new ES920 and 520, is kind of redefining how big a speaker you can really get on a slim instrument. That ES920 clocks in at with a pair of 20-watt speakers, which is kind of insane. However, for their weight and size, these are very, very respectable with a pair of 8-watt speakers for 27 pounds of total weight. They also both have 192 notes worth of polyphony, and in many ways they basically have the same chipset, although the PX-S3000 has a lot more content in terms of tone selection, in terms of rhythms. It's loaded up with way more stuff, but the core processing capability between these two is essentially the same. So you've got the same core guts on both instruments. And we're going to get to the action later, but we'll mention up front, they also have the same action. So the differences between these two instruments largely lie in their functionality and just the sheer range of sound selection that you have between these instruments. But otherwise, if you were going to be playing this primarily as a piano, if that was going to be 98% of the intent behind getting this, the PX-S1000 is a really interesting choice. For its price, it's going to go right up alongside Yamaha's P125. It's right up alongside Roland's FP10, and in fact we have done a review where we compared those three instruments, and the Casio certainly held its own, so you may want to go and check that out as well. Let's listen to both of these instruments before we go any further. And I should also mention, we are not taking stereo line out of these instruments. We are actually using some high quality, large diaphragm condenser microphones that are placed sort of just right in front of me and behind me, so we get a stereo image for both of them. Because I really think that speaker quality is something that, as much as we can, we should be letting you hear that on these videos. It's really easy to take a line out and get squeaky clean sound, but it doesn't tell you anything at home about how these actually sound in person. So we are going to do a video where you get the sound, the line comparison as well as the mics, but at least right now you're hearing entirely the sound being generated by the onboard speakers of these instruments. So this is the 1000. We're going to start with the 1000. And we are on the default grand piano sound, and there are 3 sound modes to play in. And so I'm going to start by playing in the most basic mode, which is a fairly unaffected piano tone. So there's no crazy reverb on there, and there's no any additional signal processing on there. This is just strictly the core sound, and this is coming out of their air morphing sound. Lots of fancy words they use for it, but basically it's their proprietary tone engine, the air sound tone engine. So here we go. Now we're going to have exactly the same sound over here, and let's see if we get the same results. So it's close, but that's not exactly the same presentation of sound. It's quite interesting. So there are a few very subtle differences in there in terms of how that piano sound reaches your ear. This sounds more full, and I'm not exactly sure what would be contributing to that. There may be some additional kind of affecting or signal processing going on there. or there could be some undefined differences that Casio's put into the 3000 they haven't put into the 1000 that they're not telling us about. There may be a slight difference in the speaker quality, or it might be a slightly different amp even though they're rated the same wattage. Anyway, we can move on from there, but it is worth noting that there is a cleaner and a bit fuller sound out of the onboard speakers on 3000 than what you're getting on the 1000, but it is fairly subtle. Side by side, it's easy to tell. If they were in a totally different room, totally different day listening to it, not sure that the difference would be that obvious and probably not fall into deal breaker territory. The selection of sounds on the PX-S1000 is quite good, although looking at the display for this, you would be a little, well, certainly you could be forgiven for thinking that this didn't have much going on, because the onboard controls for the PX-S1000 is probably one of the only, to me, one of the only major downsides to this instrument. But that is easily solved by the use of the Cordana app that Casio makes. And so I've got that hooked up. I'm using a smartphone connected with a USB. It does have to be connected with a USB because another thing that Casio made the decision not to do is include a Bluetooth data radio. There is no Bluetooth MIDI connection on these two instruments. You can stream Bluetooth audio to the instruments, but it does not work with the MIDI, so you need a cabled connection. Yamaha has done this with a lot of their lower level portable products, so I mean Casio is not the only one not including this, but it is becoming a bit of a standard. Both Roland and Kawai certainly include Bluetooth MIDI on virtually all of their portable products, right down to the base models. Anyway, the lack of control that you get with the onboard display with the PX-S1000 is enough that I would almost... The lack of control you get on the PX-S1000 from the onboard controls without digging into page 85 or whatever page it's actually going to be into the manual to get all of the more complicated, shortcut key commands, it's almost to the point where you should not even try and use the PX-S1000 unless you are going to use it with the Cordana app, which is an easy thing to do because it's not like it's poorly designed or difficult to use. It's actually quite easy to use. And so you plug it in, the connection is instant, but it's very, very easy to connect. And we will just do that. And so you plug it in. Right away, it's going to detect what instrument you're using it with. And you have several options. You've got an audio player in there, which I'll talk about a little bit later. PDF score, MIDI player, a few other options, mostly like the ability to access the manual from here, which is actually kind of handy. I wish other manufacturers made it that easy to get to the Mac. I always lose manuals, but maybe that's because I don't like manuals. Usually keep things around you like. Anyway, so here's the piano remote control, and that is what is going to help us unlock what's loaded on this PX-S1000. Once we're in the piano remote control, now we have the ability to easily select from all of the different tones that are there, as well as turn layer mode or split mode off. And so if we get into the piano and all of the other stuff, we can see that there are 17 sounds in total, and we can also octave shift it as well. Strings, pipe organ, jazz piano, which has a bit of a chorus thing going on. And then your first three instruments. Concert, grand piano bright, and mellow, which is really mellow. Now that is in total contrast to what you get over here on the PX-S3000, because not only do we go from, you know, just over a dozen sounds, we get into like 700 sounds. I mean, it's an absolutely mind-bogglingly large number of tones that you now have the ability to select from when you get up into the PX-S3000. And not only that, it's actually fairly easy to access all of those tones directly from the display. So there's not even a need, although there are reasons why you might want to hook up the Cordana app, there's not a critical need for you to do so right out of the box. You can use this quite aptly because of the inclusion of that display. There's tons and tons of functions that you can get to, and the way that they've laid the functionality out and the menu structure on the screen, it's really, really quite intuitive, and you can get to everywhere you need to be. So without the use of the Cordana app, we can select from a tone mode, a rhythm select mode, sort of a control, a whole control parameter mode, as well as our memory bank mode for saving all of these presets. So it's very, very easy to get into our piano, and it looks like it gives us 28 keyboard instruments that are associated with the piano category. Jumping over to E-piano, 42 associated with there. And one of the things that they've done, which is a really quite smart way to do it, is they've subcategorized this as well. So within E-piano, if you press it once, you get to your default piano sound. Not sure why that's the default one, but whatever. And if you press it again, it's going to jump to the next subcategory, which it looks like it's thinking is a clav. And one more, and then you get up to the vibes. But you can still use your plus and minus signs to navigate within those subcategories super, super easily. And we've got organ on there, strings, pad, and then others, and that's just an absurd number of tones. Flutes, saxophones, leads. Yeah. Really high quality stuff in there. it seems like that's a very similar, if not the same sample set that you're actually getting on the Casio CDP-S350. Might be the same. So very easy to navigate the tone selection without the use of the Cordana app, and that is enabled both by a nice 3-line display, which they've used very efficiently, as well as a well-designed control interface here. It's also easy to get to the rhythm, and that's a whole other section of tone that isn't even available over on the PX-S1000. And so that gets into the auto accompaniment stuff as well as just the drum tracks. But the biggest part of the differences on the Privia PX-S3000 is really what makes this a highly usable stage piano and synth. And that's where it leaves the PX-S1000 totally in the dust here. And it leaves me feeling like the pricing on these two doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's not that I think the PX-S1000 is overpriced. I just think that what you're getting for the money, the PX-S3000, might just be underpriced, because a $200 gap between these instruments, in my mind, makes just no sense at all. The amount that you get for the 3000 is just absurd for the relatively small difference in price. Now, this only applies, of course, if you're going to use any of those extra features. So let's move on to the next section. We've talked about just the core sound, the speakers, the polyphony, and all of that. We'll deal with you know, the action and the quick discussion about the action, but I'm going to reserve a whole section at the end of this where we're going to really get into all of those extra features that, quite simply, the PX-S1000 doesn't have a shred of. So we'll get some specs up about the tone engine and move right on to action. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll be back in just a minute. So moving on to action. Now, both of these instruments have exactly the same action. This is a smart scaled action that Casio came out with specifically for these instruments, and everything was shortened on it in order to accommodate this slightly smaller, more compact frame of the instrument. So the key stick length is a little bit shorter. It means the hinge is closer to the front of the key than normal. The counterweights obviously have to be shorter, and so the geometry of this action is quite a bit different than what you'd find in other plastic graded balanced hammer actions like this. And I think one of the unintended results is if you actually measure out the weight of the keys, this was a discussion point on a lot of forums and a couple of other review sites, was that the black keys actually wound up weighing a little bit less than the white key. And of course, in an ideal situation on an acoustic piano, the black key actually weighs the same as the white key, etc., etc. I will say that the physical weight of any action, the physical weight of any key, is only one part of how you actually interpret or you actually perceive the action. I have played many actions where they actually weigh out quite heavily, and my brain doesn't actually think that it's that heavy. And so it's this relationship between the touch response and the physicality of the action and the interplay of all of that that delivers to your mind this message, oh, that's a heavy key or that's a light key. And it can be influenced by the most subtle of things, 0.5 millimeter of extra height on a black key, or a black key that sits just slightly further back in the overall you know, anatomy of the keyboard, which is not something that's always standard, actually. If you compare acoustic pianos and digital pianos, you actually see that there are very, very subtle differences in terms of the length of the white part of the key when you get back to the where the black key starts. Very, very, very minor changes there. So all of that can have an influence. This being said, this particular action has never left me with anything but a generally positive impression. It isn't my absolute favorite action out on the market, but I think it's an extremely usable action, and I find that I'm able to get a fairly responsive musical performance out of the action. The extreme, the things that I would prefer it be a little bit less, The grain on top of the black key, I actually find makes it a little bit too slippery right out of the box, but after playing it for a few hours, I find that a bit of hand oil resolves that issue just naturally. I like the texture on the white key very much. That works quite well. And so, you know, it's an action which I find quite pleasing to play compared to some of the other actions in the price range, such as Yamaha's GHS. I definitely prefer it to that. Overall, it is on the lighter side, or at least as to my previous discussion, I'm perceiving it to be on the lighter side compared to some of the other actions out there. It's definitely lighter, feels lighter than, say, Roland's PHA4, but it would have a fairly similar kind of a weight to Kawai's responsive, the RHC, responsive compact hammer compact act. Don't remember the exact words there, but I also do notice that in compressing the action, the speed, the repetition speed on the action, I think has suffered a little bit because of that compactness. But let's consider who the target audience for either one of these instruments is, and it's probably not a high-level classical player who might be making some regular use out of a really fast repeating action. This is likely going to hobbyist players or people who are just starting out, or in the case of the PX-S3000, a very good chance that you're going to get some professional players using this on stage for some R&B fusion gigging, things like that. Again, the chance that a repetition speed that you might find necessary for some playing of Liszt or Mozart or anything like that may just not come up if you're in the middle of jamming through a Stevie Wonder tune. Good chance it won't. So all this to be said, this action, if you can, obviously play it before buying it, but if you can't, my very best comparison would be that the Kawai action that you'd find on, say, a KDP 110 or an ES 110, something in that range in terms of the weightiness of it, and just a more exaggerated texture than you'd find on anything like that. And a little bit, certainly a little bit lighter than the Roland, and more responsive, I find, than the Yamaha GHS, all in that same action. Okay, so we're going to move on to our very last section. Thanks so much for sticking with us, which is, let's dive into everything the 3000 has that the 1000 really doesn't, because this is where it gets really quite fun. Here's some specs on the action. We'll be back in just a sec. So the two big feature areas or feature sets on the 3000 that really make it stand out over the 1000 is its auto accompaniment rhythms, as well as these two little knobs and pitch bend wheel that sit here on the left. I cannot overemphasize how important this is to making this a usable instrument in a professional setting. Not only because having those extra control surfaces give you a lot more opportunities to create organic, natural sounding synth expressions, but the way in which they have set this up makes it so easy to assign settings to there. The intimidation factor to use that or experiment around with using those knobs is very, very low. It just means a lot of people are actually going to be able to use this and not have it be one of those features that never really gets touched except for the very, very highest echelons of the professional community. That happens all the time on digital instruments, by the way. You're going to get 90% of your users using 50% of what the instrument's capable of, because that last 10% is just so complex, requires such a high level of fluency with the space that most people just don't bother. This is not the case. You are definitely going to know how to use those two knobs as well as the pitch bend wheel. And then, as we said before, the auto accompaniment is super fun on this instrument. So I've got this hooked up to the Cordana, and I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is to get this happening. So if we go down to accompaniment, it gives us many, many options. So it shows us exactly what the rhythm is that it's selected: electro, funk, pop, 1. There's a lot of them to choose from. The accompaniment mode, is it on or off? If it's off, obviously you have full use of the keyboard. As soon as you turn the accompaniment mode on, it turns the bottom half of the instrument sort of into a series of key triggers and input for harmonics and things like that. Now, it also has arpeggiator and auto harmonizer, which is something that most instruments that have these basic auto accompaniment functionalities built in just don't have. And these are a lot more fun than what you think. You want to play around with this because it takes the playing experience to another level. So I'm going to show you what that's all about. And then arpeggiator hold, on or off. Obviously, that means that once you've pressed it and activated it, you can take your hand off and it just keeps going. If that's not on, you have to have your hand held down in order to activate it. And then what you want the arpeggiator part doing. You also have the option for what fingered mode you want on. Fingered 1 is usually the standard one, where it's everything from just a single note will give you major, and you can kind of slowly add the complexity by adding up to 4 notes. And then you've got the auto harmonizer as well. So tons and tons and tons of options. So what does this sound like? Well, let's listen. So that's the arpeggiator at work there. And that's the auto harmonizer. going on a little bit too long with that. But anyway, you could hear where the auto harmonizer was getting used in there. You could hear that the arpeggiator happening, and you could see how easy it was to switch back and forth between a lot of those different variations and control it with my left hand as well. So fun to use that feature. Now, here's how you would make use of those knobs that we just mentioned. So on the function menu, if you go down to control and then knob is right there, and now you can assign that knob to be really whatever you want. So it can be a filter, brilliance reverb, chorus, amp envelope, vibrato, delay, or you can also assign it to control the digital signal processing parameter, which is a whole other thing that is right here. And that is where you can have EQ bands, compressor, limiter, enhancer, phaser, chorus, tremolo, auto pan, rotary. So let's take a rotary. So I've now assigned the knob to control the digital signal processing effect, which I've assigned to be drive rotary. And so the top knob is now what's controlling the speed of the rotary speaker, and the bottom one is the drive. Now, you wouldn't normally put that on an E-piano. You would obviously usually put that on an organ. Oh, still have auto accompaniment on. Let's turn that off. So those are two big feature areas that's going to make this an eligible candidate for some professional use. On top of that, you've got 1/4-inch outputs out of the 3000 where you don't have that on the 1000 as well. So clearly Casio is intending the 3000 for a different audience than the 1000 was. And like I said before, the only thing that doesn't make any sense to me isn't that the 1000 should be cheaper. It's I don't know why the 3000 shouldn't be a few $100s more expensive for everything that you're getting here. It really is quite a remarkable value in my opinion. Now, part of that could be the Casio is still slowly breaking into some circles that it never used to have the right to play in. You know, you still hear comments about Casio is kind of just a toy. They don't really, you know, they're not in the league yet of some of these other professional companies. They are nipping at their heels. I mean, this is a situation where if Casio continues on the direction they are, not only are they going to have a very strong reputation for home digital pianos, which they already have over the last couple of years, but they're going to start to make some inroads even into some of the professional products that they are tackling. Hope you have enjoyed this comparison between the PX-S1000 and the PX-S3000. Very, very small price difference between the two. Both available in a very similar cabinet with this shiny plastic, these kind of touch controls without any buttons. I mean, we didn't really get into that, but that may be something that you like or dislike. I've never found it to be an issue. But a very different user experience between these two instruments. If you are going to be using primarily piano sounds, piano and electric piano sounds, and it's for your own personal use, PX-S1000 might serve you very, very well. If you are thinking about using this for any wide variety of semi-professional, professional uses for the few $100s, don't even give this a second thought. Just order yourself a PX-S3000. You'll be glad you did. Both are available with matching stands, and both are compatible with the floating triple pedal system. You can't get this with the fixed triple pedal bar along the bottom like you can in some of the other brands, even some of the other Casios. But I didn't really find that to be an issue. I actually found that their triple pedal stayed put quite well. Out of the box, though, both are coming with those small little plastic pedals that no one really likes, but you know what? It's not that expensive to upgrade it to something that works a bit better, and that may be another thing that I'd suggest people really look into. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you know and understand the differences between these two instruments a little bit better. And if you've enjoyed the video, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and heard, we would really appreciate if you subscribed. We would love to see you back for more videos. We would love to have you as a new member of our piano appreciating, piano learning, piano loving community all around the world. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube, and we will see you again soon.